So my world kind of got rocked this morning a little bit.
In a good way or a bad
Rock.
way? Did you because you could go a lot of different ways. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
It was in a, I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about? You feel what I'm saying? Like your world can get rocked in a number. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you.
All right, Pop.
It was in a sports way. It was rocked in a sports way.
Yeah, well, that's not as
I
enjoyable.
kind of gotten into my Cowboys coaching search groove.
Okay.
I had a feel for the names, and I was all squared away, and I checked the odds this morning. Who's the next Cowboys coach? And the co-favorite was Kellen Moore. The co-favorite with him I hadn't seen on a list before, and it was Brian Schottenheimer, former Cowboys offensive coordinator, since everybody's currently unemployed. He hadn't even interviewed with the team, and he's listed as the co-favorite for the Cowboys head coaching position. Clarence, why?
I'm going to pass it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a Schottenheimer whisperer.
Okay. Now Joe is the one who
I wrote about this.
No.
yesterday.
You. Oh yeah.
You wrote about it last
You
week.
blew my mind with a theory as well. Okay. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah,
Joe.
so let's go through the
Tell
timeline
me
really
something,
quick.
Joe.
Let's go through the timeline really quick. A week ago, we found out that Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys would not be doing a reunion. So what do we do that day? We, as reporters, start texting people. Okay, what's going on? What have you heard? And I talked to one source, and I got a list of a couple names there could be interest in. And this person's pretty close with the higher ups at the Cowboys. And they listed Robert Saleh as a potential interview. They listed Kellen Moore. And then they blew my mind and said Brian Schottenheimer. And I said, for OC? And they said no.
The guy who just hangs out with McCarthy?
Right.
Yeah, and they said no, potentially head coach. And I was like, okay, so why? And they said, well, the reasons for Schottenheimer are, one, there's questions about he was the offensive coordinator the last 2 years, but Mike McCarthy was the play caller. There's questions about how much Schottenheimer was actually allowed to do and how much of his ideas were actually heard in terms of the play calling thing. Hey, would he game plan this and it would not actually go in the actual game plan? That's one of the questions there. The other thing about Schottenheimer is that he's well liked, and here's the other thing too is he probably would be pretty cheap.
Oh no!
The Cowboys ownership. What does Jerry Jones tell us? What he might want? He might want an incentive-laden plan, right? Well, if you don't have a lot of leverage in terms of what are your options, you might get an incentive-laden plan. Go prove yourself. You want your first head coaching job? Here you go. You want to be the play caller? Here you go. Another thing about potentially Brian Schottenheimer is the Cowboys ownership could have a little bit of ideas and manipulation on who joins his staff. A la Jason Witten could be on the staff.
Lord.
And if you add Jason Witten to your staff, the one question about Jason Witten is how much can you translate what you've done in high school to the NFL, right? How much is that learning curve? Well, why don't you go get an internship for 2 years as the assistant head coach and tight ends coach for Brian Schottenheimer? And if Schottenheimer doesn't work, then maybe Jason Witten becomes the head coach in Waiting. That's one potential. The other thing, too, is for Schottenheimer, it's like, hey, here's your opportunity. Go earn your next paycheck. If it works out, great. And then you have Jason Witten and, waiting on staff, and then you had a good staff, right? Other things about this is that, the Joneses love him, but there's also no interviews you said with Brian Schottenheimer yet so far.
Yeah.
So we're talking about all this. He's the co-favorite. I reported on Thursday that there's definitely a lot of interest there. Adam Schefter reported as well. Jimmy Johnson came on Saturday and said it. There's definitely smoke here. There's real. I don't know if it would be to be the head coach or to be an offensive play caller with the likes of a defensive-minded coach. But as of right now, I would not discount this. I think this is a real potential. So
that blew my mind because this morning before when we were talking, first opinion, it's super embarrassing if you're a Cowboy fan because it's, again, just grabbing a candidate that no one else is considering as an NFL head coach and going, that might work for us because for us, our ultimate goal is to hire a guy who's not a worthy head coach because that way it'd be easier to give Jason Witten his job later. I think that's embarrassing, but it did blow my mind because that makes sense. Like Schottenheimer's name is in the mix exactly because he wouldn't be a hot name. And it would be easy to set up Witten to take his job later, and that is the most Cowboy thing I've ever heard.
In this timeline, when we're talking about Brian Schottenheimer, who will then be, I guess, ushered in Jason Witten in years to come, we're cooked. Like we are doomed. Like,
and that's literally planning for who your head coach that you really like could be the head coach in a few years and not even worrying about what's happening today. It's
right. So, and this is you go back to our first segment talking about how are these other teams where they are, and the Cowboys have twice as long as they've been to the NFC East championship, the NFC championship game. It's things like this. It's things like, I'm going to put a coach in now who is cheap, who I can kind of fundamentally maneuver the way that I want to,
Right.
who I can set in place his predecessor on his staff, and he won't give much pushback from to me for it. And then we're going to take a guy 4 years from now will be the guy who we look at, or 3 years from now and say, hey, this will be our guy, and hoping that guy is the guy that takes it. Like this can. You wonder why we are in the place that we are in. It's because of these current decisions that have futuristic outlooks to them that make absolutely no sense and does not guarantee you, or at least the perception of it, doesn't guarantee you any type of hope of a successful future. Because the now doesn't look successful. And now you're talking about this and what's in line from this. We are cooked, man.
Yeah,
we
I mean,
are cooked.
When I talked last week about this whole process that no coach excites me about being able to win now, it's because of the process. It's because they still have to deal with Jerry Jones. They're not changing their ways. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about Dez and Michael on the internet this weekend arguing about the culture. The culture is Jerry. The culture is Jerry.
Yeah, Dez and Micah fought on the internet.
Trying to place people on someone else's staff. The culture is nobody. Schottenheimer is epitome of nepotism in coach. I like him, great guy. I was covering high school.
Nepotism makes sense in coaching. If you grew up with it, you might have a chance to know what you're doing.
Again, but my point is he's epitome of nepotism, but no one's ever interviewed him for a head coaching job. Yeah. No one's ever tried to give him a job. He's been a failed coordinator. He came here, as an analyst because, Mike McCarthy knew his dad. He gave him a bone to come and be on the staff. They made him offensive coordinator when he started deciding to call plays, but he was not the play. He was not a decision maker. The idea that we're going to come out of the blue and justify, well, that was Mike McCarthy and, Schottenheimer, who's, again, no one's ever was trying to give him a coordinator job, let alone a head coaching job. Maybe we need to see what his ideas are. Why? Where's this coming from?
Because it'd be really easy to yank the rug on him for Jason Witten.
Again, that's the process. That's the problem. That's why it's hard to be excited about no matter who they hire because of who's running things.
Some other tidbits on Schottenheimer. He's been in the NFL for a long time. I think a lot of people look at Schottenheimer, it's like, oh, he's a young guy. Well, he's 51 years old, been in the NFL for a long time. He's been an offensive play caller for 10 seasons. He's had 4 top 10 scoring offenses, but they've also had, look at the Jets. They went to the AFC Championship twice. They had some good defenses there. That's when Mark Sanchez was there when they went to the AFC Championship back-to-back. The other thing, too, he has had head coaching interviews before in the past. This is before when he was more of a hot candidate, the young up-and-coming son of Marty Schottenheimer. So not recently. To your point, he was an offensive analyst with the Cowboys before he was named OC. But I do think that if you look at Schottenheimer, he's really well-liked in the building. He's very charismatic. I think that there's a lot of things that make sense in terms of why the Joneses might like him a lot, frankly.
Yeah. Charismatic. Yes, all of that.
I'm just telling you what I've heard.
I know. No. I think it's very good information. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I told you blew my mind earlier. I think it does a great job also of illustrating everything that's wrong with this organization and how every single bit of it stems from Jerry Jones' gigantic ego. I think it's all disgusting. And I need to hear in the next day or two that they're trying to or scheduling an interview with the guys that, the rest of the league thinks should be their next head coach. Like Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn can interview now. Ben Johnson's going to pick between 3 teams that he thinks that there's a reason to go coach them that will pay him. But you're just... The fact that the priority is guys who no one else in the league is interested in having as their head coach because they'll be affordable and be a great setup so that your friend can be the coach next is so disgusting and takes all hope of just ever being a competent franchise out the window. It is disgusting.
As we go through this coaching process, it doesn't remind me, but it kind of just shines a light on all that Mike McCarthy was going through.
No doubt.
like literally, yeah. You hear some of the things that we're hearing now, and we're seeing how this process is going. Mike was probably looking at this, waiting for the in line to get here, and yeah, I'll take another head coaching job if you give it to me under my terms this time. Yeah. But there's no way I'm taking anything less than to deal with this for 3 or 4 more years because it is insane.
It's just a matter of who is the next setup.
Yeah.
Like that's what McCarthy, like I was talking to our buddy Brian Broaddus this morning. He used the word paranoid about McCarthy the last year or two. He's like, and he's been kind of paranoid. And I'm like, well, yeah, they openly talk about how the DC would be a great head coach.
Yeah.
They gave you an offensive coordinator. Everybody's talking about Jason Witten one day. Why wouldn't you be paranoid? And it makes sense when you're unemployed to accept this. Can I get one S word? It makes sense when you're unemployed and you really want to get back in the league to accept a shitty job.
Yeah.
And so McCarthy did. And then you win a bunch of games and you're dealing with it, and you signed up for that, and that's fine. But the next guy's going to sign up for the same thing. It's a terrible situation where it's always a setup, where you will not have security. You have no idea if the team's going to actively try to win or be willing to risk any part of their $10 or $20 billion, whatever the net worth is. They're not going to be willing to risk those assets to try to help you win at the game while wanting you to be held accountable to the standard of, look, if you want me to make money per game won, great. Refund every season ticket holder for every game lost. Like, let's play this game together. But they're not interested in it. What they want to do is they will take all profits and they will socialize every cost and they will work just at whatever makes them the most comfortable in their day-to-day life, not at making sure that their business is successful. And it is so miserable, and I hate it so much, and I hate it so much, and I hate it so much. But, man, it makes for good content.
Jeff, how many coaches coached in the last year of their deal in the NFL?
Probably not a lot.
Not a lot. It's head coaches?
No,
Rare.
not a lot.
Rare, right? The Cowboys have done it the last 3 times. Where was Mike McCarthy ranked in terms of salary in the NFL?
Probably 16th to 24th. I have no idea.
Low, right, for a team that has the most valuable thing. My point being, this is how the Cowboys operate. So if you're kind of shocked that Brian Schottenheimer could potentially be a candidate, look at who they've had recently. They've had someone familiar. They had Mike McCarthy, who got a low ball offer that had to deal with the stresses of coaching on the last year of his deal, which is not a thing. This is how they operate in terms of coaching hires. So if you want Ben Johnson, the smart, OC, you want Aaron Glenn, that makes a little bit more sense. But I don't think that's where they've proven that they want to go. I think Adam Schefter had a quote this weekend I thought was really, really good. The Cowboys are operating on their own timeline in their own universe, is what he said.
And that's them.
That's the problem.
That's them. And that, like, if you need an illustration of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, one team now has a 15-year longer gap than anyone else in the NFC at getting to the title game. It's probably because 31 teams are competing a certain way, and you think that you can do it, be one of 32, doing it totally differently, and that somehow you have the better idea. You don't. You have the worst idea. You hope to God that you can draft and develop amazingly and overcome the fact that you're one of 32 that is not competing to have the best people work for you. It's insane.
We all silly like the mayor.